The routine comm aboard the USS was shattered when the loudspeaker announced the target, Truk Lagoon. Lieutenant Commander Philip H. Torrey Jr., head of Air Group 9, felt a knot in his stomach. "My first instinct was to jump overboard," he would later say, half joking, half serious. Truk was the Gibraltar of the Pacific, a ring of reefs guarding deep harbors, coastal batteries, radars, airfields, and fuel depots, all sheltered under the umbrella of the Japanese combined fleet. Years of rumors had turned its name into a synonym for a death trap. Those who entered didn't leave. But it was February 1944, and the U.S. Navy wasn't looking to survive. It was out to settle the score for Pearl Harbor. What was brewing wasn't just another raid. It was a full-scale assault rehearsal aimed at the logistical brain of Japan's Micronesian stronghold, designed to dismantle its myth with surgical precision and prove that the strategic initiative had shifted hands. The momentum had started 2 weeks earlier when Kwajalein fell with unexpected speed. Admiral Chester Nimitz sensed the opportunity. Truk, 340 miles away, would serve as a springboard to the Marianas, and from there, B-29s could put Japan within reach. If Kwajalein was the gate, Truk was the lock. Since World War I, the atoll had been off-limits to foreigners, cloaked in deliberate secrecy. From it flowed convoys, spare parts, aircraft, and fuel to the Central Pacific. In the mess halls of U.S. carriers, Truk's name was spoken in hushed tones, with a mix of respect and superstition. Attacking it seemed reckless, bypassing it, unforgivable. The dilemma was resolved methodically. First intelligence, then air saturation, and finally a sustained strike on ships, runways, and tanks, all compressed into 48 hours of calculated violence. On the same day Kwajalein was secured, 2 PB-4YS and AB-24 from VMJ, 254 took off from Bougainville with a simple, deadly mission: photograph Truk from high altitude and return alive. Through banks of clouds, they glimpsed the beast, a lagoon of blue waters encircled by a 140-mile reef, a natural fortress. Below, shadows of anchored hulls, docks, hangars, fuel depots, and aircraft lined up like sardines on the runways of Eton, Moan, and Perham. Cloud cover prevented a complete mosaic, but it was enough to confirm the target's value and its vulnerabilities. Good low-altitude approach routes and a first strike on the airfields could let bombers operate with minimal opposition. The cost, however, would be high if the enemy managed to get airborne. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance entrusted the mission to the newly formed Task Force 58, led by Vice Admiral Mark Mitchell. 3 of its 4 groups would hit Truk. The 4th would support an amphibious assault on Eniwetok. The lineup was formidable: 5 fleet carriers, Enterprise, Yorktown, Essex, Intrepid, Bunker Hill; 4 light carriers, Below Wood, Cabot, Monterey, Cowpens, and over 500 aircraft, including F-6F Hellcats, SBD Dauntless, SB-2C Helldivers, and TBF/TBM Avengers, escorted by battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. The plan exploited a technical flaw. Japanese radars were effective against mid- and high-altitude contacts, but nearly blind to low-altitude approaches. Mitchell designed a reverse Pearl Harbor, an initial sweep of fighters at low, medium, and high altitudes to clear the skies and runways, followed by 6 staggered bomber waves every 2 hours, with escorts and targets assigned by island and dock. In the pre-dawn of February 17th, carrier decks buzzed like hives. Hellcats rolled to catapults with extra fuel tanks and loaded machine guns. Deck crews waved paddles, and one by one, F-6FS roared into the air, skimming the water, hidden by the sea's curvature. Surprise was the primary weapon. What Mitchell didn't know, and fate granted him, was that Japanese fear played to his advantage. After reconnaissance flights, the combined fleet had evacuated heavy ships to Palau, leaving Truk packed with transports, auxiliaries, 2 light cruisers, and hundreds of replacement aircraft without pilots. The defensive ceiling seemed high, but the base was exposed at its weakest point, the gap between alert and reaction. The 22nd and 26th Air Flotillas were tasked with defending the skies, but 2 weeks of constant alerts had drained guards and worn out crews. When the first radar blips appeared, it was too late. Hellcats came in low, invisible to radar, as mechanics scrambled with chocks and extinguishers while pilots strapped into hot cockpits. The opening act was brutal. Gunfire raked runways, fuel tanks were punctured, hangars riddled, and parked planes erupted in flames. The Gibraltar awoke defenseless, forced to scramble under fire with the initiative lost and time against it. Anti-aircraft batteries, powerful in theory, struggled to find angles or altitudes. What was meant to be a trap for intruders became a cage for its own air force. Leading the charge, the Grim Reapers of VF-10 from Enterprise, with William "Killer" Kane, tore into Zeros trying to intercept. 2 bursts, 2 flames, then a climb and dive to down 2 key 44 Toyos that barely got airborne before crashing back to Earth. Lieutenant Frenchy Rule chased a Zeke, pursued a roof in a near-stall loop, and finished an A6M3 with clipped wings. The Reapers lost one F6F and its pilot, Ensign Linton Cox, but left a trail of burning wrecks across Eden and the lagoon. Each low pass multiplied shrapnel, severed hoses, and left ground crews battling impossible fires. The Japanese command, caught off guard by the attack's altitude, lost precious minutes coordinating takeoffs. By then, the second wave of Hellcats from VF-5, Yorktown, descended on the seaplane base at Dublin, shredding anchors and moorings. 5 flying boats were destroyed in seconds. Then VF-5 climbed to join the dogfight, downing late-arriving Zekes and roofs. Above, VF-6, Intrepid, and VF-9, Essex, split altitudes. Lieutenant Alexander Vrashu and his wingman, Louis Lee, stayed high, ambushing a section of Zeros that had gained altitude. The F-6F, steadier at 250 knots, dictated the fight. 2 Zekes and a roof fell to Vrashu. Another Zero caught his burst through clouds. Separated in a surprise attack, Eugene Valencia was tailed by 6 enemies, dove to wave-top level, outmaneuvered the leader, and downed 2 more before returning riddled but intact, joking, "If this Grumman could cook, I'd marry it." Truk skies were becoming American skies. Meanwhile, carrier decks thrummed with the roar of dive bombers and Avenger torpedo planes. SB-2C Helldivers from Enterprise, heavy but lethal, took off with 1,000-pound bombs for docks and visible depots. Mitcher's orders were clear. The first waves wouldn't seek immediate sinkings but would sever logistical arteries, runways disabled, fuel burning, workshops destroyed. The philosophy was simple: blind and bleed the enemy, then finish it. TBF/TBM Avengers carried Mark 13 torpedoes, refined after 1942's failures. Their initial mission was to target larger vessels, cruisers, destroyers, or transports, still at anchor before they could escape through the reef's channels. With flat seas and growing light, the attack geometry was perfect to trap the Japanese fleet. Chaos reigned. Hangars, hit by initial passes, blazed like open bonfires. Black smoke columns rose thousands of feet, spreading over the lagoon and guiding later strikes. Ground crews tried clearing runways of twisted metal, but each cleared stretch drew another wave of Hellcats or Dauntless, dropping fragmentation bombs that shattered asphalt. American coordination was near choreographic. Each island had assigned fighter-bomber pairs attacking in turns, avoiding saturation but maintaining relentless pressure. Japanese defenders, lacking a centralized command, saw many planes hit before reaching 30 feet. Those that got airborne faced veteran Hellcats, battle-hardened from the Gilberts and Marshalls. By mid-morning, Intrepid's radar detected movement south of the reef, several contacts, likely transports, and a light cruiser, attempting escape. Mitcher redirected 2 Avenger squadrons, escorted by VF-6 Hellcats, to cut them off. Torpedo planes dropped to wave-top level, propellers kicking up spray. Enemy gunners fired desperately, green tracers crisscrossing the air as water columns erupted beside the planes. The Avengers held firm, fanning out to launch torpedoes at crossing angles. 3 hit the cruiser Katori, halting it. Unescorted transports became easy prey. One exploded after 2 hits at the waterline. Another burned stem to stern, a floating torch. At Dublin, the garrison's administrative hub, the situation deteriorated rapidly. It housed supplies, munitions, and fuel for the local fleet. Dive bombers, led by VB-10 veterans, exploited clear visibility to attack in sequence. From 12,000 feet, Helldivers dove near vertically, releasing bombs below 2,000 feet and pulling up at the limit, so close to the water that spray splashed cockpits. Each explosion raised geysers of fire and shrapnel, mingling with smoke from burning depots. In hours, Dublin lost most of its logistical capacity. Cracked docks, toppled cranes, and fuel supplies nearly severed. Truk's administrative heart had taken a blow it couldn't soon recover. On the flanks, light carriers like Below Wood and Cowpens worked in sync to prevent enemy planes from escaping to secondary islands. Their Hellcats patrolled low and mid-altitudes, downing seaplanes trying to flee from small coves. In 1 hour, Below Wood claimed 5 confirmed kills and several probables. The sea around the atoll filled with debris, floating wing fragments, capsized rafts, burning fuel drums. To American observers, the scene recalled Pearl Harbor's early images, but reversed. Now they dictated the tempo, punishing the enemy in its lair. Mitcher radioed Task Force 58, maintain pressure. No target escapes. At noon, with much of the enemy air force destroyed or scattered, Mitcher shifted tactics to focus on the remaining fleet in the lagoon. Avenger pilots received precise coordinates for each anchored vessel, while dive bombers synchronized their strikes with torpedo explosions. The damaged but still moving Katori became the priority. 3 waves hit it in under an hour. 500 and 1,000-pound bombs struck from deck to stern, while torpedoes tore breaches below the waterline. A final internal detonation, likely in its magazines, split it in 2, flames and smoke marking its end. The afternoon of February 17th became methodical hunting. Air groups scoured the lagoon in grids, sinking transports, barges, and landing craft hiding in narrow channels. Japanese gunners fought with determination, but the volume and precision of U.S. air strikes overwhelmed them. Veteran pilots spotted patterns, ships camouflaged against shores, net-covered depots, even decoy structures. Nothing worked. Fragmentation bombs and HVAR rockets shredded concealment attempts. As the sun dipped, painting the lagoon in reds and blacks, Mitcher assessed initial damage. Dozens of ships sunk or crippled, airfields inoperable, and Truk's air defenses nearly annihilated. Late on February 17th, as Japanese ships tried forcing the reef's exits, Spruance, reluctant to limit the battle to air strikes, ordered a surface action. He formed a group around the atoll with battleships Iowa and New Jersey, heavy cruisers New Orleans and Minneapolis, and a destroyer screen. The order was clear: seal exits, shell coastal batteries, and finish anything fleeing. Navigating near the reef risked mines, hidden guns, and submarines, but the operational reward was immense, turning Truk into a trap. As air groups swept the lagoon, Task Group 50.9 advanced, firing counter-battery salvos at gun flashes on Dublin, silencing opposition with radar-guided fire. Smoke over the lagoon formed a backdrop as 16-inch shells arced orange, hammering targets marked by air spotters. Soon, lookouts reported a disorganized group to the north: the light cruiser Katori, auxiliary Akagi Maru, destroyer Maikaze, and minesweeper Shonen Maru, with destroyer Nowaki, trying for open sea. Aviation had already battered them. Holes at the waterline, deck fires, but they could escape if they reached deep water. Spruance spread the net. Iowa, New Jersey, and cruisers opened fire. Initial 16-inch salvos raised white columns, adjusted by radar, then landed direct hits. Katori, listing but defiant, returned fire. Maikaze launched torpedoes at New Jersey. A Hellcat's radio warning let the battleship dodge. That would have been embarrassing, Spruance later quipped. Akagi Maru, ablaze from bombs, was abandoned. Shonen Maru was silenced. Only Nowaki, fast and cloaked in dusk, slipped away. As the horizon turned purple, the battle shifted. Carrier radars picked up slow, low contacts and faster ones at mid-altitude. A small wave of B-5N-Kates with makeshift radar and minimal escort. Mitcher bolstered the night combat air patrol, but Truk's night was a maze of glints, smoke, and islands. Anti-aircraft tracers wove patterns. A late roof fell in sparks. Still, one Kate slipped through, skimming the water, invisible until the last second. At 2200, It launched from Intrepid's beam, its torpedo striking the starboard quarter. The hit tore rudder sections, opened leaks, and wrecked compartments. The deck shuddered, but the ship held. Damage control teams sealed floods, doused fires, and rigged backup steering. Intrepid was out for months, but Task Force 58 kept fighting. Far from rattled, Mitchell tested a taboo that night, a fully nocturnal carrier strike. Hellcats and Avengers, modified with massed formation lights and improved instruments, took off from Enterprise with 500-pound bombs. Guided by black islands against the glow and timed flares dropped upwind, they crossed the lagoon in pairs at low altitude. Japanese defenses, alerted by a red light from Moan, raised a tracer ceiling. Gunners aimed at exhaust glows, but U.S. timing held. Bombs hit stranded transports, landing craft, and makeshift docks. Only one Avenger was lost. The lesson was noted. The night could belong to carriers too. Dawn on February 18th brought an eerie silence. Hellcats swept the skies and found them empty. Surviving planes had fled to secondary bases overnight. With no aerial opposition, F-6Fs dove low to finish runways, hangars, and remaining hulls in one pass. Anti-aircraft fire hit Lieutenant J.G. George Blair's Hellcat. He ditched, left to the waves. Two wingmen orbited, burning their last gallons to strafe a Japanese destroyer probing closer. From cruiser Baltimore, a Kingfisher floatplane launched, landed deftly, plucked Blair into its rear cockpit, and took off, heavy as a duck, returning with barely a liter of fuel. The CAP withdrew in shifts, a choreography of fighters, reconnaissance, and rescue ensuring no one was left behind, even under coastal fire. With air defenses gone, Mitchell saved his darkest card for last, Dublin's fuel tanks. Igniting them earlier would have blinded his own planes with smoke. Now, in the final wave, Dauntless and Avengers dove together. Bombs ripped tanks open like cans. Heavy fuel ignited with a deep roar, sending oily smoke columns thousands of feet high, visible for miles. It was the final curtain of a systematic demolition. By day's end, the toll was staggering. About 270 aircraft destroyed, 17,000 tons of fuel lost. The U.S. Navy lost 25 planes and Intrepid temporarily. Beyond numbers, a doctrine was refined. Low-altitude ingress to evade radar, preemptive fighter sweeps, staggered attacks, and real-time flexible command. The strike on Truk had immediate campaign impact. With the Pacific's Gibraltar neutralized, Inuiatok's capture faced no strategic interference, and the Marianas lay open. Psychologically, it shattered Truk's invincibility myth. Operationally, Japan lost a key logistical and refuge node for its combined fleet, already fled to Palau and beyond. Spruance returned in April to prevent rebuilding, and in 1945, the Royal Navy mopped up what remained. For U.S. naval aviation, Hailstone cemented the Hellcat fast carrier duo. Mitchell's audacity and integrated air-surface rescue operations set a standard. Today, Truk Lagoon is a graveyard and museum, shattered hulls, silent planes, and twisted tanks under coral. Beneath lies a lasting lesson. Well-coordinated naval air superiority can gut a fortress without setting foot ashore. The return to Majuro was no triumphal parade but a release of tension. Hangars filled with scorched planes, decks stained with oil. Exhausted crews, hands blackened, knew they'd written a new chapter in naval air warfare. Spruance commended Mitchell for precision and economy. Mitchell credited every pilot, mechanic, and sailor who sustained the relentless pace. Intelligence processed aerial photos and prisoner interrogations, planning the next strike. The sea closed over Truk's wreckage, and the Pacific became a moving chessboard again. The message to Tokyo was clear. No anchorage was beyond the U.S. Navy's combined air and sea reach. In Japan, shock and urgency rippled through map rooms. The Naval General Staff admitted underestimating Task Force 58's mobility and reach. The combined fleet, scattered to avoid another Midway, lacked a clear center of gravity. Its ability to project power in the Central Pacific eroded. Truk, once a sanctuary, was relegated to a secondary base. Supply lines had to retreat, requiring more escorts and draining scarce resources. In Washington and Pearl Harbor, the report validated island hopping and advanced logistics. Operation Hailstone didn't just destroy ships and planes, It redrew the map of the possible. On a human level, every deck held its stories. Pilots flying 3 sorties a day, sleeping in seats. Gunners firing until barrels glowed. Rescuers venturing into enemy waters for a comrade. Among them was a sense of something greater than a battle, a tangible proof that sustained sacrifice and coordination could break even the most feared strongholds. The limping Intrepid, headed for repairs, became a silent symbol of the fleet's blend of vulnerability and resilience. Letters and diaries spoke less of victory and more of the strange calm after danger passed. Decades later, Truk Lagoon is a submerged shrine for divers and archaeologists, a time capsule of February 1944. Amid corals and fish lie upturned cruisers, broken destroyers, and fighters asleep on the seabed. Official history calls it an operational success, but underwater remain traces of men, fears, and split-second decisions that shaped entire campaigns. Hailstone's echo, beyond tactics, reminds us the sea doesn't forget. Every strike on its surface leaves marks that outlast the roar of explosions. Thus fell Truk as a fortress, and thus was forged the naval air supremacy that carried the U.S. Navy to war's end.